with us today about the e-commerce toolkit is Betsy McGinn, who's the founder of McGinn e-commerce consulting. So let's welcome her up.
When I get started, I always like to ask the question, is there anybody in here who's doing e-commerce currently? And are any of you working with Amazon? And how is that? Is that an easy and delightful process for you? Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah. That's why I have a job. So I've been working in e-commerce for about 11 years, which is about 1 million years in Amazon years. And I've helped about 40 companies launch or fix their business, address those chaotic, crazy issues that can happen when you work with Amazon. So I've tried to put together a brief boot camp for you. If you are now working in e-commerce, you'll probably look at this and say, this is like the very tiny toe of the boot camp, because there is so much to know, and it's so different than brick and mortar, and in some ways so much more complex. So that's why I'm looking forward to any questions you might have later, and I'm going to kind of breeze through this because I think I have a lot more content than we might be able to get through. So I put together a little agenda just to take a look at the state of e-commerce, what I consider the 3 most important tools, which have more to do with who you are and who you are as a brand, and then taking the 4 very traditional foundations of brick and mortar strategy, which are product pricing, placement, and promotion, and looking at those. I'm going to say up front, when I talk to my clients, I add in 2 additional P's. One is profitability, because the profitability equation on e-commerce is entirely different than brick and mortar. And then the last one is platform, because there's all sorts of different ways you can sell on e-commerce, and that takes a whole session in and of itself. So let's get started with just looking at what is going on in e-commerce. And I think that this quote really summarizes it. So Jeff Bezos always says, today is day 1. And recently in an interview, somebody asked him, what does that mean? What is day 2? And he said, day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And I think that characterizes a lot of your conventional competitors, right? Yesterday, somebody mentioned that General Foods is one of the leaders in the e-commerce space for conventional companies, and 1.9% of their business is in e-com. That's big. That's tiny for the brands I work with. They can have anywhere from 10% to 50% of their business in e-com, because as somebody pointed out, that's where a lot of opportunities are for these brands. The other interesting point that I think it's important to consider when you're a new brand is some of the things that I'll go through which really differentiate brick and mortar from e-commerce, but why there are so many different opportunities in e-commerce I think will become readily apparent. So we all know that Amazon is the leader. They represent about 44% of all US e-commerce. In 2015, during the holidays, they surpassed any brick and mortar sellers, and we're seeing this trend continue as about 3,700 brick and mortar stores close this year. That doesn't mean brick and mortar is not going to exist, but it does mean that brick and mortar continues to reinvent itself. I was on a panel recently where I had an opportunity to talk to someone who is really successful in brick and mortar, which is Keen Shoes, because they create an experience in their retail stores that makes sense for consumers. And so just because there is that opportunity online doesn't mean that there aren't great opportunities for you in brick and mortar, but it's important to look at where you can really seize those. And I think our Caroline really captured it in some of the things that she was talking about with her products earlier. The food or the consumable space is expected to grow in e-commerce to about $100 billion by 2025. So this is sort of the last bastion of e-com, like figuring this out. How can we make consumables this huge part of our business? And I think Jeff Bezos is on track to do that. And this is just a quick look at what some of those consumable categories are. 2 of the ones that really stand out on this chart are drinks, beverages, and snacks. That doesn't mean that if you're in bars or you're in condiments or you're in other categories that those aren't also top sellers. They are, and they're growing. The opportunity is great, and they're growing at a faster pace than anything in brick and mortar. But this is just some of the top categories and what they represent now. and what their growth rates are. So one of the questions I get all the time is, how big is my category and what can I expect my share to be? So I think that's a very interesting question for e-commerce, because I like to say the sky is the limit, right? No category is mature, right? It's still growing. It's still where the greatest opportunity is for consumables. And if you look at some of these brands that are the top selling items on Amazon, Kind Bar, Orgain, Nut Pods, Wild Zora, and 7th Generation, they are all small brands that are punching way above their weight. And these are brands that do that amount that I'm talking about, 10%, 20%, 50%, and launched there. So many of them launched there and have had such great success there. So that is why small and nimble, as the speaker said earlier, is so important, because CPG companies, the large CPG companies, aren't. I was recently at a conference that was really geared towards the biggest brands in CPG, and they were talking about these pesky micro brands that are taking over e-commerce. And that's you, my friends. You're those pesky, contemptuous micro brands that are kicking their butt online. So I want you to continue to do that. So what are your most important tools? This is where I see the most challenges, again, with big companies, is an open mind, or your attitude. Because you will be asked, you'll be called upon to do business in a very different way. Everything from looking at how you promote, to what your finance department does with your Amazon business or other e-commerce partners, to how operations functions around this, because all of these dynamics can be very different. Secondly, I say commit now. There's never going to be a better time. There's never going to be a perfect time. I know brands that want analysis out the yin-yang before they'll make a decision. This is the future. This is the business now, and this is the future. Analysis, no more analysis needed. Jump in and figure it out as you go along. And then also perseverance, because as pointed out by some of you that are doing business with Amazon, it can be frustrating, but it's important to just sort of embrace that frustration and forge forward, because the opportunities it creates, because you don't have somebody controlling your business, but you're doing more of the control of your business, is what really new brands benefit from these days. And here are some of the ways in which it's very different. So as you know, getting into Target, Walmart, Whole Foods, there is a gatekeeper. They're the person who makes the decision about your products. But online, it's the consumer. The consumer is largely the gatekeeper for your products, because you have so much control getting your products in front of the consumer. Relationships can get you really far in brick and mortar. Again, it's one of the biggest frustrations for larger CPG companies, because they're used to being able to wield these relationships. But in e-commerce, you're better off embracing automation, which will get you further than any relationship you could develop at Amazon. I can tell you that time and time again. Limited shelf space, largely in control of CPG, paying for that space. A meritocracy online, because there is no limitations to the shelf space. The cost of entry or slotting in brick and mortar can be extraordinary and out of reach for a lot of small brands, but online there is rarely any kind of cost of entry or brick and mortar or slotting. The time frame to succeed in brick and mortar. How many times have you heard of companies that paid, $40,000, $50,000 to get on the shelf, but they didn't perform, and within 6 months they were out? Well, e-commerce doesn't care about that. They want to offer you the variety. They are more concerned about your profitability as a brand to them than they are about your ability to make turns. They really want to see the selection. Trade rates in brick and mortar are around 15%, but in e-commerce, 30%. Ouch. That's not a bad thing. It just means that you need to plan for it. Strategic price points are all important on the shelf, $3.99, $4.99, $5.99, but it's a totally different game online. Consumers are used to buying in multiple packs, and so those key price points go right out the window. Brick and mortar, high-low strategy. You need to be discovered in e-com, so that promotional strategy has to be always on. And focusing on top sellers. That's all they can fit on the shelf, but on e-com, limitless shelf again. So this is where Amazon becomes the everything store because they want to have long tail brands and long tail products. So just a quick look at the 4 Ps. Best practices around product. So with product, what's really important online, you don't even need to think about offline, right? Is my product going to ship properly? Is it going to break? Is it going to leak? What is the weight going to be like? How is the consumer going to buy it? Do they want a multi-pack so that they can taste, the varieties and then make a decision? Do they want something that will fit within a subscription cycle? Like, for example, I get Bywater delivered to my house the first week of every month because I won't go to the store and buy a case of Bywater and schlep it home, but I'm happy to have Amazon send it to me because I know I'll use it in a month. So the consumer just shops very differently. The optimal price point is in a very unusual place. It's I say between 15 and 30, but I've seen it as high as 15 and 40 where the consumer is completely comfortable buying at that price point. And it also helps, having products that sort of break the mold of that brick and mortar product you have on the shelf really helps you with that price comping issue, that your brick and mortar customers will come to you with when they see low prices on Amazon or someplace else. Because if you have a 4-pack, they're not going to readily be able to make that comparison or feel the pinch from it. But there's some things that you don't think about when you're doing business online. So don't change that UPC. I know that that's a pain when you're doing business with Kroger, but it's a deal breaker when you're doing business online. And the reason is so many consumables in particular, are part of subscription programs. So Amazon's subscription program being incredibly successful, the second you change a UPC, you break that consumer relationship. They don't get to opt in, they are automatically opted out. And so you lose about 15% of or 15 to 20% of your existing consumers. And then IRCs, instant redeemable coupons. So sounds harmless, but if you put an IRC on a product you're selling online, you're essentially sending Amazon's consumer to then go buy it in a store, right? That's a no-brainer when you think about it that way. No temporary packaging. It's confusing to the consumer. They want to get exactly what they see online. No additional 15% for a limited time because everything about your product selling online is dependent on your weight, your dimensions, all of those things, and they can't change. So just some tips for you to think about as you're formulating your online strategy around your packaging, or your product and your packaging. And pricing. So this all dovetails together. So when I have someone ask me, like, well, what should I do about my pricing? Well, it's really tied right in with your product and your pack. It's not a simple answer because you can see some of the best pricing strategies are around creating a pack that is not, that's differentiable from brick and mortar, right? Because then you have a unique pack for Amazon and you don't get that pricing blowback that you could normally. Also, integrating unique factors for your e-commerce packs versus brick and mortar is a strategy. And being really aware of how you implement a MAP policy just at the source, because Amazon won't sign a MAP policy. But if your product out there is priced right in the market, you won't have problems on Amazon with price matching. And guess what? People don't go to Amazon for the lowest price. They think they're getting a fair price, but they're going there for the selection. They're going there for the uniqueness of the products that you make that they can't find everywhere, and they're willing to pay the price for it. So this leads to the question, what are margin requirements for Amazon? I like to say not all margins are created equal because it's not formulaic. Here's the example I like to use. So you have 2 balls. They're the same size. They could each have the same margin, right, if they're on the shelf at some store. But if you look at them in e-commerce language, one weighs 1.5 pounds, one weighs 17 pounds. One of the biggest costs of doing business online, obviously, is shipping. So could your buyer at Amazon expect the same margin buying the basketball as the bowling ball, right? Because we're talking about shipping of maybe $5 versus $25. So e-commerce partners typically look at contribution profit in dollars rather than in percentages. So the margin equation is a little trickier to figure out with your brand because it's based so much on the weight, the size, all of those sorts of things that would need to be uniquely looked at in terms of your brand to give you a good answer. Placement. Content is king, really, to have great basic product content, to have enhanced product content with the uniqueness of your brands. This is what you want where you want to tell your story to consumers. Having great images and videos, again, those are something that can really tell your story. And all of that leads to product reviews and product rankings, which are so important because most people start their consumer product searches online now. Even if they buy in a store, they do their research online because they want to read the reviews. So it's a virtuous cycle, really. If you get great reviews, then you get sales. If you get sales, it increases your product ranking, and you want your product to appear on the first page because very few consumers move beyond that first page. So all of these things, you can see how they link together. It's not each of them in isolation. Promotion. Promotion, again, is a very interesting new dynamic. Gone are the days when marketers think about penetration or awareness, because what is really important now is you have this great dynamic where you're doing promotion online digital strategy. Why would you have a dead end when you can drive right to the sale? And so the old sorts of strategy and marketing are dead. The other thing that's so important is to be always on, right? Because you need discoverability. There's 1 million products on Amazon, and you're literally a needle in a haystack if you don't continue to bring new consumers to see your product. So working with an always-on strategy is really important. It's also important to know when you try something from a digital perspective, just continue to iterate on it. Don't get discouraged and abandon. I've seen that over and over, and it takes a long time to get it right. But when you get it right, the results of your strategy will really pay off. So just more on promotion. Always think of promotion in terms of what your e-commerce partners are doing and want you to do with them. They don't care about your 25th anniversary. They don't care what your themed promotion is for the quarter. They know their consumers, and they know how to make your product sell to their consumers. So work with what they have and take advantage of all the opportunities that they have out there for small brands as well as big brands. So this is a question that I often get, which is, should I do my website or should I do Amazon? Or should I do both? So I like to ask this question these questions when I'm thinking of advising on someone's own site. Because here's some brands that have been incredibly successful with their own sites. Soylent, The Honest Company, Hum Nutrition, Dollar Shave Club, Dirty Lemon. So the first question I ask is, what resources do I have? Do you have the resources to put the time, energy, effort that it takes to make your site a success? Do you have the resources to do that as well as selling on Amazon or wherever else you choose to go? Because it does take work. It's not a turnkey process. Do you have a fulfillment option that will be advantageous enough for you to afford to do this? Because nobody can fulfill cheaper than e-commerce partners. But if you think that this is a part of your model that you can easily implement, go for it. Is my product differentiated enough to cause the buzz and the demand and the desire to go to my site? Because frankly, most people shop fish where the fish are, right? They go to Amazon because they can buy their kitchen sink and their tissues and their food all in the same place. They don't go there, they don't want to go to other sites typically unless there's some compelling reason. So Dollar Shave Club is a really good example of a compelling reason. When you go to a drugstore typically to buy razors, it's often locked up, it's super expensive, it's really inconvenient, and what they did was create convenience at a reasonable price without the barriers that currently existed. So they had this model that really made a lot of sense to consumers. But if you're selling laundry detergent, does that make sense to put the the focus on your site, is that something that will really draw a consumer to your site? Or is it, if it's something unique, like Hum Nutrition, where they ask you to input all of your information and it's a subscription program, can you offer something that's unique enough to make people come to your site? Talk to people that have done it. It's really important to find out what other people's experiences are. At my last job, one of the things when I was at 7th Gen, we discovered is it's really expensive to fulfill from your own site, especially when you have large diapers or heavy laundry. So talk to people that have done it and have been successful or not, and find out what some of the advantages and pitfalls are. And lastly, I just wanted to show you some of who I think would be great strategic partners for you. This is an abbreviated list, by all means. There are lots out there. I put Chewy on because dogs NOSH too. And there's grocery delivery sites that are great to work with. Some are better than others. I think Amazon's going to totally revolutionize that with Whole Foods purchase, but we haven't seen it yet. It's coming. And so these are just some great partners that you might want to consider as you're thinking about who to partner with on e-commerce. If you really want to know what makes Amazon tick, I would recommend reading this book. It's called The Everything Store. It's about 6 years old now, but it is a fascinating story of Amazon. It is not a dry read. It's a great airplane read on your next trip. It's entertaining, but it is informative, and it will help you understand and even maybe come to peace with some of the frustrations that you experience at Amazon. So I would really recommend, as you're looking at business going forward with Amazon, take a look at this book and see what you think. So that's all I've got for you. Are there any questions? Yes?
Actually, I have 3.
I'm sorry, say it again?
I have 3.
Oh, okay.
So, with regard to Amazon, how important is it for brand registry?
Mm-hmm.
How important is vendor central and seller central? Can you elaborate on that? And then the third one is keywords. Like, how does Amazon look at like keyword ranking and as far as your brand being, the most searched on the platform?
So the first question was around brand registry.
Right.
Really important. It doesn't help you get third-party sellers off the site that are selling your product, but one of the things it does do is give you more control over the content. So if there are third-party sellers that have bad images or crummy content, your content will rise to the top, and you have more latitude with, filing a case with Amazon to change some things.
Well, we don't have that. We don't have third parties. How do we get into brand registry easier in the last, in the last couple of months?
Mm-hmm.
Amazon has been hitting really hard from what I've heard on my team as far as getting into brand registry.
So I think almost all of these questions we'll have to take offline because they're really detailed, but they do have an application process, and my clients have made it through their new application process, so it is doable. The most important piece of documentation is the FDA certificate. So if you don't have something like that, it is going to be a little challenging for you. As far as the 2 platforms, Amazon actually has 3 or 4 different ways you can sell. One is Vendor Central, which is you sell directly to Amazon. They're just like a retail partner. And then there's Seller Central, where you own the product and Amazon can either ship it for you or you can ship it from your facility. And they're extraordinarily detailed. There are so many considerations that you need to look at before making decisions about them. And one of the things that is most important, again, is looking at the profitability of your brand in each of the platforms to determine which one's right for you.
Do you do both, though?
You can, yep. And I do have clients that do both. I have more and more that are going only to Seller Central. Yeah. Sorry we're out of time, but thank you.